Okay, hey guys, hey, this is Anne Marie, and this is the Anti-HR channel. And today we are going to have a free-flowing conversation with my good friend Tammy Triolo of PCQ Consulting. Did I get that right,
You
Tammy?
did. You did.
And we are going to be talking about Christianity and white supremacy and the ways in which Christianity helps to prop up white supremacy. Um, and so if you're interested in this conversation, stay tuned. First, this is the Anti-HR channel. On this channel, I talk about HR, I talk about employee workplace rights, and I talk about lots of other things as well, because there are a lot of systems that contribute to the workplaces that we experience, right? Especially in the United States. And so I talk about HR, employee workplace rights, and a lot of other issues from the perspective of employees and what is in the best interest of employees. And I try to help employees understand HR better and understand their workplace rights so that they can assert those rights when they need to do so. So if that's of interest to you, please hit the like button, please hit the subscribe button, and share this video with a friend. Now, today we're talking about white supremacy and Christianity, or Christianity and white supremacy. And I want to say this up front because I know that this topic is going to trigger a lot of you, right? I was raised as a Christian, a very devout Christian. My parents were very devout Christians. I was like, prayer meeting Wednesdays, choir rehearsal Fridays. My parents 7-day Adventist, church on Saturday all day. Couldn't watch TV. Very strict Christianity. And I know that a lot of people who are devout Christians are going to be triggered by some of what we're going to talk about today. So I want to preface this by saying, if you're not open, your mind is not open enough to have a conversation about how Christianity helps to prop up and support white supremacy, especially in the United States, but everywhere, honestly, this might be a video you want to skip, and that's okay. But I think that if we are very and truly committed to dismantling white supremacy, you have to be willing to have a conversation about Christianity, especially now, and how it is being used to support the structure of white supremacy, to prop up white supremacy, right? To prop up the nationalism that is growing out of white supremacy in the United States and elsewhere. And how it is that Black people, especially, but also Indigenous people, because you are a student in history, you know the campaign that was undertaken to strip Indigenous people in the Americas of their beliefs. Children were taken from their parents and put into schools. Their hair was cut, which is a horrible thing to do to an Indigenous person. Horrible things were done in the name of Christianity. So I think it's important to have a historical context to this, but also to have a conversation about how it is that Black people became such devout Christians. Because some of us are more devout than the most devout, especially in America. Because how I came to decide to have this conversation, Tammy, because I've mentioned this to you, is every time I will bring up issues around white supremacy and racism, someone comes into my comments to talk about how much prayer is going to fix it and how their belief in Jesus is going to fix it. Frustrates me deeply because I know that that's not going to fix this. If it was going to be, if it was going to fix it, it'd be fixed already. And for me, it flows into the idea that Black people are here to suffer, that we are supposed to suffer, and that then we'll get our happiness later while they get to get their happiness now. And I have a problem with that idea. And I believe that Christianity, as it has been institutionalized in the United States, for lack of a better word, and elsewhere, has really been used as a weapon, as one of the weapons of white supremacy, to strip people of their culture, to strip people of their knowledge of themselves, to strip people of, their belief in their rights as humans, right? And to subject it to white supremacy beliefs that one group of people is more favored than any other group of people, and therefore has the right to degrade and enslave, right? And that somehow God is okay with all of it. Right? And
the thing that I have been getting in my comment section on TikTok a lot when I've talked about like white supremacy, you cannot discuss white supremacy without discussing Christianity. It's impossible because Christianity was the tool used to enforce white supremacy, right? This belief that these savages needed saving and converting. I've seen so many African people, and it's such a beautiful thing to see this awakening happening with African people that will say things like, if Christianity was worth anything, white people would have never given it to us.
Mm-hmm.
It would they that's just not what they do. They wouldn't have given it to us. They wouldn't have gone around the world trying to get us to believe in a religion, because you cannot inherently believe in destroying my body but wanting to save my soul. It's an oxymoron. And Black people have to contend with this. Why would a group of people that believed in destroying our bodies, our minds, our spirits, be concerned about what happens with our soul at the end of this? Like, I mean, if you just think about just from that perspective, it would
Well,
be
let
insane.
me tell you a story because I was raised to believe a lot of different things, and over my life, but one of the greatest gifts that my parents gave to me was the joy of reading, and that I had a right to think for myself, right?
Yes.
And often to my mother's dismay, right? But she's the one who told me I could think for myself, but didn't always like the way that the thinking would go.
I know.
But I
I
always
know.
appreciated that because she's the person who gave me Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee to read when I was 9 or 10 years old, and lots of other books, right? There were books everywhere in my house, and because my mother was studying for a master's degree, and she would give me those books. But one of the, in my adult life, one of the things that really made me start thinking about this topic of Christianity and white supremacy was when I went to Africa for the first time. When I went to the continent of Africa the first time, I went to Ghana. I was sent there for a business trip. And while I was there, I was very, very busy, but I knew that the one thing I wanted to do was I wanted to go to Cape Coast Castle, right? Which is one of the slave castles, the castles where the last place people saw before they left Africa on the transatlantic slave route. And I went, if people have heard of the Door of No Return, I wanted to see it, and I wanted to see the castle. And one of the things that struck me, and we went there, and it was the one thing I got to do on that trip before I literally went there the first thing in the morning because I had a flight out to another country that evening, and I really wanted to do it. And one of the things that happened when I was there, and it's a very impactful thing. You will not leave that experience feeling the same. The other place I went to also to the island in Senegal, which it really feels haunted when you go there by the spirits of the people that were there. But when I went to Cape Coast Castle, they were taking us around the castle, and there are all kinds of things that you see that are very upsetting. But one of the things that they showed us at one point is and these rooms were dark. When you went into these holding areas where they crammed people in before they put them on these ships, it was completely pitch black, right? If they close the opening, it's completely pitch black. And one of the ones we went into, above it was a church. So literally, they were holding human beings in these caves below a church while they were worshiping God above. They had human beings below them that they were then going to send off somewhere to make. This was
I think that was the first part of the indoctrination, right?
Right. And so literally, you're under there in the dark, and people are probably singing hymns and all these things above you, right? And I thought to myself, what kind of religion would allow people to believe that it is okay for them to do this to another human being and to go to church while they're doing it? That's what I thought to myself while I was down there. Like, what kind of a religion? And this is the religion that I have been taught all my life. And then the more I thought about it, I thought about how, as all of us are as Black people, the only thing that separates us is where our ancestors got dropped off. That's why I always find these conversations about the
diaspora wars.
The diaspora wars and conversations about who's a foundational Black and all this stuff, because all of these things, we'll have a conversation about that another time. I just find it problematic because the only difference for me is some of us got dropped off in South America. Brazil had the longest history of entire
and the largest Black population outside of Africa.
The largest Black population, and kept slavery the longest, right?
Yeah.
And you know, and the Portuguese, because this castle was the last holders were the Portuguese, right?
Right.
And when you go to Portugal, which I've also been to, they don't talk a lot about their history. When you go on their tours, you know, I found a special Africa tour because I was determined to get the African perspective. But when I went on other tours, they talked about their great explorations, and I was the one who had to raise my hand and ask questions about slavery and their great explorations, right? Because I had been to Cape Coast Castle and was so disturbed by
Yeah.
what I saw there, right? And the castle went through lots of different hands and was used by all the different holders in the same way, right? But I do believe it was built by the Portuguese. I will correct it if I'm wrong about that. But it was, you know, you dropped it off in South Africa, Caribbean, and North America,
Americas.
right? Mexico also was a place,
Mexico.
which
Yeah.
people don't know, but there's a whole area in Mexico of Black Mexicans, right? And I'm not talking about the slaves that came into Mexico when they were trying to escape slavery and that Mexico refused to send back. I'm talking about there was a port in Mexico,
Well,
right?
yeah.
So
Like, yeah,
I don't think a
I
lot of
find
people know that, but Mexico also is part of Central America, and then, you know, North America, what is now the United States of America, right? You know, America stands out because I always say, you know, Americans, we like to do everything the best. So when we got slavery, we decided, hold my bear, right? So
yeah.
chattel slavery, as we understand it, is something that America perfected, North America, the United States of America. But slavery and the idea of and the role of Christianity in slavery is something that you will see, just like that transatlantic route, everywhere the ships stopped, you will see the impact and how it was used to
Yeah.
control the minds of the people who had been enslaved.
Well,
Right?
here's the thing, because enslavement first has to start in our minds before our bodies are ever captured, right?
Absolutely.
Like you are enslaved in your mind, and you know that Black people are enslaved in their minds, because Black people will say, with out of their mouths, they thank God for slavery, because had it not been for slavery, they would have never been introduced to Christianity. Do you understand the brainwashing that has to happen to an African to say out loud of their mouth that God used something so horrible as slavery to get the gospel to us? Now, what kind of loving God needs to enslave his own children for 400 years, have them beat, raped, treated like property, cattle, their kids eat and this religion conditions you to suffering. And so then no suffering is off board.
It doesn't condition white people to suffering. It conditions Black people to suffering. And I think that's a very important thing, because
I think it conditions poor white people are conditioned to suffering, right? Because most of the people who are Republican in this country, in the United States, tend to be poor whites, right? And so those are the same white people who will vote against their own interests to access to better healthcare, access to better food, access to all these things. Because in the same way that religion was given to Black people to neutralize us, it was also given to poor white people. This is why poor white people are some of the most religious people. Like, Christianity is bad for everybody except the very wealthy and the very privileged that gave it to us to control all of us. Christianity is a tool of control. Now, the fact that Black people have allowed it to control us the strongest and the hardest is a mind and mental game that we are stuck in. And I was saying to you before we started recording that our minds, we have been taught that God is outside of us. God is outside of us. We kneel to him, we pray to him, we go to him, right? And so the God that lives within all of us, right, that gives us the power to achieve everything that we have, when we achieve those things, we turn around and give it away to the Christian God. So our minds are creating our own prisons for ourselves. It's like we're creating our own evidence of a God, of the Christian God. Now, this is not me saying that God doesn't exist. I do believe in a God. I just don't believe in the Christian God that I've been taught to believe in, right? But I do believe that there's a God, but I don't believe it's a Christian God, because there's nothing loving about that God. And if something is loving about that God is demonstrated he loves a certain group more than he loves the rest of us, right? Because if the slave masters are praying to the Christian God and the slaves are praying to the Christian God, we know whose prayers he was answering. And it was not ours.
Well, you know, and what I love about this conversation is Tammy and I have slightly different thinking about this, but our conclusions are the same, right? because I mean,
we end up at the same place.
I believe in Jesus, and I always tell people that I believe in Jesus. I pray to Jesus. I believe that Jesus was the Son of God. I do. But where I differ is which God was he the son of, right? Because I do have a concern about the God that I was told for the same reasons. Because once, and Cape Coast was a turning point in my mind for that. Was Jesus's daddy the same person that they've been telling me he is? Because I thought to myself, what kind of religion and what kind of God allows people to believe that this is okay for them to do, right? And I look at how it was used not just to justify slavery, but to also justify the colonialism that
Yes.
and that has destroyed countries and destroyed lives. Because we don't talk a lot about that. We focus a lot on slavery, but we don't focus. If you travel as I do, then you get to see it up close, right? But how it has been used in India, in anywhere Christianity has been, how it has been used to destroy the culture, right? And the people in all these, in different continents, all across the world, right?
And people will justify it destroying people's cultures.
Right, the justification for doing it. And that the foundation is really the institutionalization and maintenance of white supremacy, right? But couch it in Christianity in order to say it's okay, and how they went to India and tried to destroy. They weren't successful, but they tried to destroy their beliefs. I was recently on Threads, and this person posted, and they got killed for it, thankfully, but was like, oh, they just found out that, there's not a lot of Christians in Japan, and they're so concerned about how, there needs to be more, quote, evangelism, unquote, in Japan. And people like rip this person to shreds, and rightfully so. And I was like, now I really want to go to Japan. I've been thinking about it, but now I'm even more interested in going. And I said, probably part of the reason the society in Japan is the way that it is, and it's so community driven,
because Christianity
doesn't really exist there, right?
And isn't that a testament? Isn't that a testament to why this religion is so incredibly harmful? Why it's so harmful? I asked this question. Okay, so that person wrote, there isn't a lot of Christianity in Japan. Now, what we know this to be true, that the countries with the highest rate of atheism, where they don't even believe in a God, is European countries. Where is the shock and the desire to run to Europe to save these white people, to get them to come to Christ? For as Zionists as Christians are, you'll never see them touch the white Jew to try to convert him.
Nope.
You'll never see them do it, right? So if that doesn't tell you, this is a white supremacy religion. This is not a religion of all people. Because if Christians were really concerned about the saving of people, why do they need to go run to Japan to save the Asians, or go to Latin countries to save the brown people, or find every tribe in Africa to get them to convert? But Europe, that has the highest rate of atheism, they don't even believe a God exists. There is never
no one's going over there.
Why?
Evangelize. It's very interesting, because I remember as a kid,
because it's a white supremacy religion, and whiteness doesn't believe it needs saving.
Constantly taking up offering to go evangelize in Fiji and Africa and whatever. And you make a very good point, because what is the purpose of that? Because you need to conquer their culture and their religious beliefs before you can conquer the country, before you can steal all their resources and their people.
Get their mind.
You got to get their minds first. And so that is what was used and continues to be used. When you go to Africa, you have never met more devout people, nor more devout Christians than the most devout Christians encounter on the continent of Africa. You have not met a truly devout. Because one thing I will say is that in the United States, when you go into an African-American church, the gospel that is preached and the way that is preached is very different.
Of course,
because it has a different, in most churches, has a different orientation. It does speak about God and Jesus and so on in a different way than the whites would, which is why there's always been a separation between how, you know, black
Mhm.
Christians and evangelicals even talk about elections and things like that in the division. But when you go to Africa and you go to the Caribbean, they are in lockstep with the white supremacist Christian leanings, right? The belief that
Yeah.
white people are the best, the belief that white people know everything and are to be listened to and obeyed, that is still very ingrained in the way that, and the music, I might add,
Yeah.
is very much an Anglo white Christianity that you will be exposed to. Because I found it shocking the first time I encountered it. But
Yeah.
that was how I was raised, right? Because I
Right.
wasn't raised in a Black American Christian tradition. I was raised in a Caribbean home, right? And so, and that was one of the things that my parents and I first had divisions about was gospel music and other things, and that I preferred to go to the Black American church,
Okay,
right?
well, see,
I was
this is
old
where
enough
you,
to decide. I decided that I preferred and I felt more at home there and joined the choir there, and the messages that were being preached there
yeah.
were
Okay, so
different.
this is where you and I diverge as Caribbean people, right? Because, and this may be because in the Bahamas, right? And we know this because the Church of England is an Anglican church,
Yeah.
right? Things. So in the Bahamas, the number one religion is Anglican. You're Anglican there. Now, my mother was a rebel and became a Pentecostal. Um,
Wow.
joined the Pentecostal church, right? So we were raised Pentecostal. And the Pentecostal church that my mother joined was in conjunction with the Pentecostal churches here in America. So we
Oh,
belong to the PAW. So every year, my mother would come to America for convention. And my mother would tell you she didn't want to worship or praise with nobody but Black Americans.
yeah.
So every year we were in churches with Black Americans. So the preaching and the teaching that we got in the Bahamas in the Pentecostal church very much mirrors what
Mm-hmm.
we got, what you would see here in the Black American church. Like when I got to Black American church,
Different
there
experience.
was
Till I
zero
was
separation. It was all familiar to me. Nothing seemed like, oh, it was as familiar as anything else. But that's because my mother belonged to a church that was connected to the Black churches here in America.
Yeah, I had a completely different, and that's very interesting because I had a different experience. So as soon as I was able,
Yeah.
I started going in my teens to a Black American Adventist church, which I loved and enjoyed more and continued to go to, because I enjoyed the messages, everything. There's a spirit and a soul that Black Americans have in the way that they do everything, right? That
Correct.
that
Correct.
that resonated to me, and so that's where I went. I started going over there. Me and my sister started going to a different church,
Yeah.
but
No.
but the root of it all is what concerns me most, and I do feel like what I observed, very much observed when I was on the continent, as well as um, what I observed in being in the Caribbean and being raised by Caribbean people in terms of how Christianity is practiced and believed is very much in lockstep with the idea
With
of
colonizers.
with the colonizer type of thinking. And so I really, have thought a lot about how this, as I travel, the more I travel, the more I think about it, is how
Yeah.
it has been used to
Yeah.
destroy cultures, right? To steal land and to
It's
justify
that's
it all, and to justify it all, and to justify the maintenance of of a government and a way of thinking in the United States as well, because it was the in this election, the people who turned out in droves were the evangelicals and the
the
Christian nationalists and all of them, to put the person who's going into office. And I mean, we can question whether or not there were
Let's talk
shenanigans,
about the help some of them got.
right?
And the help that they got to do that was at
Yeah,
the help of a lot of Black Christians,
yeah.
right? Like a lot of the people who Trump would identify themselves as Black Christians,
Mhm.
right? Like these aren't your Black people who are talking about the economics of it all and the conservatism of. Now of course we know that there's elitism within all groups, and so that you have the Black elites too that vote Republican and vote that way, but the majority of the Black people that turned out for Trump on this
Because
belief
they're
that
Christians.
Christian about them being Christians.
Mhm.
And it's really time for Black people to just examine this religion. And I say to Black people, you cannot be dismantling white supremacy and leave Christianity off the board. That makes no sense, because Christianity was the most effective tool in white supremacy. It's the most effective tool. It is the most effective tool in white supremacy. And we know this to be true, right? Because Black people, we have been conditioned to suffer here on the earth, and then we will get our reward in heaven, right? And so when Black people feel out of control, out of their own lives and the things around them, the first place they go to is, well, in the by and by, we'll get, like, even the hymns that we sing is preparing us for the by and the by. The songs that we sing is songs of suffering to be relieved when we get to heaven. Like, we have been conditioned to suffer and to see suffering as righteousness. Right. And that is the most effective tool of this religion, is to get the people to view suffering as righteousness. And if you view suffering as righteousness, you will think it is God's divine order for you to suffer.
Yep.
And anybody telling you different will be the demonic person.
That is the thing I have always, where I separate from pretty much everyone else in my immediate family anyway, when it comes to this religion, because I do not believe that I was brought into this world to suffer. I believe bad things may happen and you have to figure out how to deal with when they do, but I don't believe that that is my purpose. The God that I believe in, I don't believe that he brought me here for me to suffer. He brought me here for me to have a good life, to have an abundant life, to have a joyful life, to have the best experiences possible most of the time, right? And I found that once I embraced that belief, I started to live that kind of a life, right? But it's like we have really been taught that we are supposed to accept sufferation, as my mother would say, and while other people get to have their cake now, we're told that we have to get our cake in the sweet by and by, and that is very much something that I think a lot of us as Christians and Black Christians have embraced that idea and internalized that idea to our detriment. And not question it, because what the number one requirement of Christianity is that you not question anything.
You not question anything. So his ways are higher. His ways are higher. And
I know that there are people who, are their brains are exploding right now at the very thought. But I just think this is a conversation that has to be had, because I believe what you said. I do not believe that you can talk about dismantling white supremacy if you are not willing to talk about what
the role Christianity plays.
And here's the thing. I'm not saying that Christianity in theory is bad, or that being a Muslim is better, or being any other religion is better, right?
Well, let me say, Anne ain't saying.
Let me just say, I'm talking about Christianity because it is the primary religion in the United States, and from a historical standpoint, is the primary religion that has been used throughout history, throughout its iteration, whether you're talking about Catholicism and then its iteration into the Protestantism and the Church of England and all of that. But it is the religion that was used in all these great explorations in order to bring people to heal, for lack of any other term. And so I do feel like we have to recognize, as the descendants of the folk that they brought to heal, right? How this religion was used and continues to be used to tell us that we are to accept things that I feel are frankly unacceptable. And
continue to bring us to heal.
It seeps into the way that we allow ourselves to be treated at work, which is the main thing I talk about in this channel, and elsewhere. That we feel, people get to do things to us and we just take it and then say, well, I'm just going to go home and pray about it. Because I've had people say that to me, how they prayed and they did this, they went to church and they did this and it just didn't change, because that's not what this is supposed to be about. That you're supposed to just allow people to treat you any kind of way, right? But we have really been taught that that's what we're supposed to do if we're good Christians. That we are supposed to allow mistreatment,
allow suffering.
And as Black people, we get celebrated for it.
Of course. Right.
So when that guy goes into the church and murders all those people, right? And then gets treated to Burger King afterwards, right? And then the people, the family of the people that are murdered are being interviewed and talking about they're going to pray for him and all this and I was enraged, right? Because and because we are expected, right? Ain't nobody expecting no white person talking about I'm going to pray for the person who cut my daughter up into a million pieces and buried her in the forest. But we're expected as Black people to always be, I'm going to pray for them, and I'm going to, and I'm going to be graceful, and I'm going to, and I just am like, I am so sick of us buying into this foolishness. But it is really something that has been really institutionalized into our minds, right?
Like,
when you talk about a prison, that's what it is. That
it is a prison.
Allow people to do these heinous things, and then you're expected to say, "Oh, I forgive them, and I'm going to pray for them."
Okay, I've been having this conversation on my TikTok page, and I've said to Black people that Christianity was never for them; it was always for us. Like, the construction of this religion was never for the people who actually constructed it. It was always meant to be a psychological tool and warfare. That 77, forgive 70 times 7, that was never for them. That was always for us. Nothing about how white people have engaged in the world represents any Christian values. Do you know why? Because the religion was never designed for them. It was always meant to be a tool for Black, brown, and poor people. Always meant to be that. Turn the other cheek. That was never for them. That was always for us. You let anybody in these United States do anything to these United States. Do the United States turn the other cheek, or do they bomb the hell out of them? They bomb the hell out of them, right? Like, it was never that forgive 70 for us, not them. Turn the other cheek for us, not them. Slaves, obey your master for us, never them. Never them. And you cannot even begin to start to deconstruct Christianity and hold on to a little bit parts of it. It's like, I'm just a little bit pregnant. Bitch, either you're pregnant or you're not. You're not a little bit of anything. Either you are pregnant or you are not. And so when you are deconstructing Christianity, right, the desire to hold on to a faith. And here's the thing. There's a reason why Christianity in itself holds so much rituals, right? Because the rituals is the thing that gets you entrapped into this faith, right? The thing when you are deconstructing, the thing that you miss is the rituals. You miss the prayer. You miss the Bible study. You miss the community. Like, church in itself is its own community, but there's a lot of ritual. Like, there's something spiritual to the rituals that we do. Think about the Christian ritual of eating the body and drinking the blood. That's witchcraft. Now, I know people don't want to talk about it people don't want to talk about it in that context, but eating somebody's body and drinking somebody's blood as a sacrament is witchcraft. That is what we're doing within this faith. And we can pretend that it's something sacred and something holy because we've made it something different. You listen, you cannot divorce something from its original intent. You cannot, you could do it, you could do the mental gymnastics around it, but you cannot divorce yourself from it. I asked the question on my TikTok, and I asked everybody to define supremacy for me. Now, I didn't say what kind of supremacy. I just said supremacy. What was interesting is that the white people that answered that question went right to white supremacy, right? Because that's the only supremacy they think exists, right? And I was specific in not even saying white. I just said define supremacy. And what I said to them is, so white supremacy, whiteness, or white people went around the world to civilize the savages, right? To make the savages more acceptable, right? Brought us here, enslaved us with the goal of making us all acceptable. Like, for white people, it isn't right until it's white. And even if it can't be white in complexion, they want you to at least be white in behaviors, right? They want you to talk softly. They want you to be nice and quiet. So whiteness went around the world, all around the world, in its effort to steal, to pillage, but also to make the indigenous people and the savages people more acceptable to whiteness. I said, now tell me what other thing has done that around the world? Christianity. Christianity goes around the world telling people that the only way to God, tell me that's not a supremacist mindset. The only way to get to heaven is through Jesus Christ. That is the definition of a supremacist religion. To go around the world and convince everybody in the world, or try to, that there is no other way, zero chance. You ain't getting in, don't pass, go. No other way to get to heaven, to be reconnected with your creator, zero way, but through this religion. Christianity is supremacy. It is supremacy to try to convince the world you are the one, the true, the only religion, the only way to God. There is nothing more supremacist than Christianity. And this is why you can take that religion and go around the world enslaving people. You can rape them and you can try to change them, because you're going in with a supremacist mindset that unless the people believe this, they are wicked, they are demonic, they are evil, and they are destined to a hell unless they believe this religion. That is supremacy. And we don't like to think about Christianity as a supremacist religion, but it is. You can't divorce it. Anything that tells you this is the only way is supremacy. Yeah. Whiteness says nothing is beautiful unless it's white. Supremacy. Nothing is cultured unless it's white. Supremacy. Nothing is civilized unless it's white. Supremacy. How is that different from the religion you practice that says, unless you believe in Jesus, you don't go to heaven?
There it is.
You're in a supremacist religion. Now, Black people get to do with that information what they will. They get to feel about that what they will. But pretending you don't belong to a supremacist religion is disingenuous and it's dishonest. And I think a lot of Black people have to disconnect their thought from that because it would feel wrong to them.
Yeah. And I mean, that's why I say it will make people's brains, explode, because you don't want to think about it in that way. Right. But in fact, that is true.
You belong to a supremacist religion.
Christianity is the only religion that is that way. I think pretty much all of
the reason why I say Christianity, because Jews do not go around the world trying to make people Jews. Muslims do not go around the world trying to make people Muslims, right? Like one of the things in the Muslim faith is Allah has to invite you to their religion. Like that is their core belief, that you don't even come to Islam unless Allah invites you. Like you're not even going to convert. Now, I'm not saying that people who go to prison, that people don't talk to them about Muslim, because, we see a lot of that in prison. Everybody become a Muslim when they go to prison. But for the most part, nobody is knocking on your door on a Saturday morning to come talk to you about Allah. Nobody.
No other group had engaged in a long-term campaign to go around the world.
Because that's supremacy.
And confuse and not even convince, basically take over people's countries, right?
Correct. And the Muslims don't do that. The Jews don't do that.
Under the premise that they were going to help save their souls, that they were saving.
No other religion does that. That's why I say you belong to a supremacist religion. Christianity is the only religion that literally goes around the world forcing its will on people, right? Like they will go into poor, remote villages and tell these people, we will build you homes, we will give you food. Like there's always a bargain trade. But in order for you to get this, you have to come to church on Sunday, right? Why can't you just build it and go? Yeah. They'll never build homes and go. They'll never feed the people and go. Do you know what I mean? I have engaged with people from the Muslim faith, like who have like food banks and shelters, and you can go and get food, and they will never talk to you about Allah. They'll never talk. They like don't even talk to you about it. Same thing with Jews. Whatever charities they have set up, you go. If you're going to their charities for food, you go get the food and you go. Christians, if you go into their places to get the food and go, they want to talk to you. They got a pamphlet for you. They want to invite you to church. They'll come pick you up. Like there is this idea that unless you come into this thing, you will not be saved. You will not get to heaven. So when I say you belong to a supremacist religion, because no other group goes around the world to convince people.
And not only that, but using it not only just as a carrot, but also as a stick. And
if
you think about what countries, even foreign policies, follow that premise the most, whose does?
Ours.
United States of America. And so it's the same thing, that the way that we do our foreign policy, the way that we, deal with different things is not, Christians love to talk about, if you talk to Christians, somebody's going to come in comments and say, oh, well, it's freedom of choice. And yes, I believe, if you believe the story in the Bible, the first story ever in the Bible was about choice, right? But that's where it seems to begin and end with Christians, the idea of choice, right? Because the rest of it is set up on forcing people, especially now, and trying to change the laws and trying to change everything to make people do something, rather than people deciding for themselves that they have a right to decide to do something, or to decide not to do the thing. And so that's why I always remind people, the separation of church and state was created to protect the government from the church, not the other way around, not the way people are trying to say it now. But if you read the founding, documents and what people wrote about it, it was because they came from places that they were being forced and harassed by the Catholic Church, right? That came to the Americas in the first place, and they wanted a society that was free from that. And now you've got politicians talking about how the nation was founded by Christians, and therefore that's why we're not a Christian nation. You're literally a nation that was created to protect the government from religion, not to protect the religious people from the government, but to protect the structure of government from religion, because of how religion can be used, right? To try to control people, because they knew what they was doing, right? And this was just the beginning of it, but they knew what they were doing, right? And so on the flip, so that's the flip side of it, is that, and people don't see these connections at all, right?
They don't. I always ask Black people to go back to what the central question for me in starting to deconstruct was, what did my ancestors practice? What did they practice? And every time you ask Black people that question, the first thing that they do is they say, well, Christianity, the oldest Bible is in Ethiopia. And I'm like, Christianity is not native to the continent of Africa. Christianity was brought even to Ethiopia. It's not native there, right? But the reason why that Black people do that, and this is why I want them to understand that they belong to a supremacist religion. The reason why Black people have to put Christianity back on the continent, because they have to believe it's the right religion, right? And so if I'm a Black person, there should be no reason why I follow this religion. But if I can place it back on the continent, then I can say this religion isn't something foreign to me. That this religion is in fact a part of where I come from. And I say to those people, we are West African, even if that's true. Africa is a continent. Even if it's true, and we know that Christianity is not native to Ethiopia, it was brought there, right? But even if that is true, we are West Africans, right? Which means we didn't practice that religion. And why do you have to then impose Christianity on your West African ancestors? Because your religion tells you you have the one and only true and right religion. And so in order for you not to even think about this religion being supremacist, you have to place it back on the continent. You have to put it back in Africa, because if you put it back in Africa, you put it back in your hands. And that's how supremacy works. You have to justify why this thing is the right one. And the way Black people justify why this religion is the right one is to say, well, the oldest Bible is in Ethiopia. But Christianity isn't native to Africa. So it was brought there too. And the question to ask, what did our people practice before ever encountering the Europeans?
And I think the other thing is that most people don't know the answer to that question. So they have to divert to Ethiopia because they don't know the answer to that question.
And they won't seek it.
One of the things that was taken away from you when when your ancestors were taken, was that you don't know what the religion was. And when you go back to the continent and you go to West Africa, then you learn, because I went to the museum in Ghana, and you learn more about the tribes and the different tribes and different languages and so on. And these are the things that they were, and they continue to characterize, and even African Americans, Black Americans were characterized as being uncivilized. And I always like, well, what's so civilized about going into a country and stealing people? And people talk about, oh, well, Africans sold other Africans. And I'm like, who did the buying? What kind of people travel If they want free labor, why didn't they enslave their next door neighbor? Right? Who get on a boat and go all the way to what they believe is the other side of the world in order to steal to buy other human beings, to make them work for them for free, right? How is that civilized? If you want to talk about civilizing people, right?
The mental gymnastics Black people
mental
do
gymnastics that
just
people engage in, right? To talk about who's civilized and who's not civilized. The indigenous people were not uncivilized people, and they weren't enslaving people and doing the things that Europeans came over to the Americas and did to them. They welcomed
Europeans were always the uncivilized people.
Right. They kept these people from dying, and then they turned around and killed them and stole all their land. Right.
Yeah.
So who's really uncivilized? You know, a lot of these things to me, you know, display the massive gaslighting that white supremacy inflicts on everyone else, right?
Yeah.
And everything that they did, they tell us we are.
Correct.
Literally everything that they did, which means they are, or their ancestors are.
Yeah.
They tell us
the projection is crazy.
We're lazy. We you know, they had to bring us because they civilized us. How is it civilized to do that to other human beings? How is it civilized to go to church while you have people underneath your church that you're planning to sell for money? Yeah. How is that civilized, right? But I do feel that there is, I mean, and I know that this is a conversation that's going to be hard for a lot of people to listen to. But for me, I think it's important for people to understand the breadth of white supremacy, and that it's in every aspect of our lives. It's a part of everything, and religion is the biggest part, right? Religion is the biggest part of it, and it's the way that we have most been, right, impacted, and the way we have been kept in line, right, is through the use of Christianity and the belief system that has been passed down through our ancestry, right? Because it's whether, like I said, it doesn't matter where you got dropped off. One of the things I learned about when I went to Portugal, and I did the African Lisbon tour, which I highly recommend. If you are ever in Portugal, please do that tour. Was some of the things that the Catholic Church did to the indigenous people in Brazil, which then I had to go on a rabbit hole. You know, when I got back to my Airbnb, I got online and I was just, you know, not shocked, but appalled because there was a statue of a priest in a courtyard. And part of the tour was he would stop and show us historic things in Lisbon, but then give us the African perspective on some of these things, and African and indigenous perspective. And, you know, so this priest has a big statue and they're talking about what a good man he is. And then he tells us all the things that the priest and the Catholic Church did in Brazil. Because, you know, to this day, Brazilians still speak Portuguese. It's one of the few places that's national language. And he's telling us all these things, and the child rapes and it's horrible. And I was like, oh my God, because even I had never heard of, I knew the Catholic Church had done terrible things, but I didn't know specific to Brazil some of the things. And all of it was done in the name of civilizing, right? Going into the jungle and civilizing these people, right?
Listen, they have always been the uncivilized savages in history. They've always been.
Important. You're right. And so I really think it's important for people to understand. And I'm like, this is not me, as I said at the very beginning, trying to make anybody stop being Christians. I think you should believe whatever you believe. That's one of the things I believe in a free society, that you get to believe whatever you want. But I think
it's when your belief imposes on everybody else.
Understand where some of this stuff comes from. And because I think the question you asked is key about what religion did your ancestors have before the Europeans showed up, right?
Yeah.
Before, and most people, especially if you're Black American, do not know the answer to that question. That's the honest thing. They do not know.
Black Americans do not know. Black Caribbean people do not know.
Caribbean people do not know the answer to that question either, and will give you the same, you know, answer that you just mentioned, because they don't, or either they'll say they don't know if they're being honest, or they'll give you the other thing. Or say,
listen, I have asked my Caribbean.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
I was about to say, because that's normally the response I get from my Caribbean people is, well, it doesn't matter. Right. it's what we practice now. And I'm like, this is why, and this could be a whole nother conversation, but this is why when the Haitians gained their independence through African spirituality, right? This is why there was such a campaign to demonize Haitians, right? Mm-hmm. To demonize them throughout the Caribbean, to demonize them throughout the Americas, because what that was teaching us is don't you dare. That's how powerful our spirituality is.
Punished to this day for it.
And they're still being punished for it, right? And so I just say to Black people, if you want to understand how powerful our ancestors' religion was, or their practice of spirituality was, go read about the Haitian Revolution and pay attention to what's happening to that country now. If it wasn't powerful, you wouldn't still be punishing a whole country this many years later after they
demonizing its citizens
and demonizing them. So that tells you there's some power there that they don't want us to have access to, because Christianity neutralizes us, right? And the way it neutralizes us is to get us accepting of suffering, accepting of, like, once you can get a people to accept their own suffering and see it as righteous, you have won. And this is why slavery continues to this day in places all around the world, and even in these here Americas, because we are enslaved in our minds first. And before they can take over our body, before they can put laws into place, they got to get your mind. And the way they have captured the mind of not just Black people, but I would say poor people. This is a question I asked as we get ready to wrap up this call. The question that I asked everybody is, you ever wonder why you don't see billionaires at church every Sunday or millionaires at church every Sunday? Because the religion was never for them. It was always for poor people. And it was a way to control us, right? Because here's the thing, if you can control people's mind, you don't have to physically, manually watch and control them. They will do that themselves. And I remember talking to a Hasidic Jewish man who was part of like a Hasidic cult. Like it was beyond just conservative Judaism. Like it was moving into cult. And he said, what was so funny about that is they get you to police yourself.
Mm-hmm.
They don't, like, the rabbi doesn't have to come to the house to make sure that you're not touching the light switch on Sabbath or Sunday. The rabbi doesn't have to come to make sure that you're not driving your car. The indoctrination is so deep that you will police yourself. And that's what religion has done to all of us, but especially because we're talking about Christianity because it's one of the biggest religion within the United States. What it has done is got us to basically police ourselves, and then by extension, police our neighbors, right?
Yep.
Because I get to tell you how you get to live your life based on my Christian belief. So my Christian belief said that being gay is wrong. So I will, if they ever in this country made homosexuality an actual crime, you will have Americans policing one another. There ain't enough of them to enforce it,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
And so what will it take to enforce? It will take the indoctrination of this Christian belief that teaches that it is wrong and it is evil and it's demonic and it's an abomination. And then all of a sudden
it
we are
all be on the hotline. And it's the same thing with hate, that I said this before on my channel. I said it recently, we have allowed, and it's all based in religion, the immigrants, the trans people, the
all
gay
of it.
people, these are the new boogeymen for us, right? These people, how they live their lives has zero impact. It's not going to, when your eggs cost $25 a dozen, it ain't going to be their fault. It actually be because some of them are no longer in your society why your eggs will cost $25, but it won't be because of their presence, right?
Correct.
They have absolutely a trans person having a surgery in prison, which probably maybe happened once, is not going to affect the price of your apples at the market this weekend, right?
Correct.
But they convinced you through religious ideology to demonize these people, to demonize them, right?
Correct.
And so, because that's how, as you said, you control people. You give them somebody else to hate. You give them somebody else to demonize, even though the basis so-called of Christianity is supposed to be love, or so they say, but it really is control in the way that it is practiced.
It's always been control. It's always been control.
And so you are saying, exactly what you said. They will all be on the hotline, because I think about that all the time. They will all, and I won't be able to wait to get there to be on the hotline, to tell on their neighbor and lie on their neighbor. And lie on their neighbor, right? Because if you saw, I was watching something on television where they were saying how they had opened up a hotline for people to report people that they thought were wrongfully registered to vote, right? That's something Republicans did in Georgia. And how all these people, a lot of people had to go justify and get themselves put back on the roll because people had called and lied and said, I don't think this person is rightfully registered in this county or rightfully registered in this city, right? And we will see a lot more of that happening, and it will all be done in the name of nationalism and Christianity.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely.
And people won't even bat an eyelid at doing it, right? Because I talk to people that I know and people, members of my family, and I hear some of the words that come out of their mouths. And I'm like, all they have to do is point you in the direction, and you'll be right there being weaponized against your fellow citizens, right?
Listen,
because
Christianity
is so indoctrinated in your
brain. The most useful tool.
And you've been taught, and it's hatred, but you've been taught that it's okay for you to hate certain people. That's what your religion has told you, that it's okay for you to hate certain people and to be to do things to harm them because
Christianity
you don't like the way they live, you don't like the way they think, you don't like the way whatever, and your religion.
Christianity by nature has robbed people of empathy, and I'm not debating that with anybody. I'm not like, that's not even up for debate.
Even though it should be the opposite. They should be.
It has robbed Christians of empathy, and this is why that there's to say there's no love like Christian hate, because that's what it is, right? It robs you of empathy, and I say this as a former Christian, and I've talked about this on my platform, is that Christianity will have you say all the words and feel none of it, right? Because the backdrop of anybody's empathy that's a Christian is, well, if you just obeyed God, if you just come to God, if you just followed his word, if you just accepted him, then that bad thing wouldn't happen to you. So I will say with my mouth, oh my God, Ann, I'm really sorry that's happening to you. But I'm listening to you to find an end to sell you Jesus. I'm not really listening to you to truly empathize with you, to truly care about your condition, and to truly find a way, how can I help you out of that position? Because again, the help that I'm going to offer you is going to come with some evangelizing. It's going to come with a pamphlet. And so empathy that just sits with you, that just sits with that human being, that just says, how can I help you in the most honest and the most compassionate way? Most Christians don't possess that. They don't possess that. And even if they don't evangelize to you that day, trust me, they're coming back tomorrow, right? Like, even if they think, well, that was really hard that day, so I don't want to bombard her with the Christian thing, but I'm going to wait till the next time. Like, our empathy was always contingent on, how do we sell Jesus? How do we sell Jesus? How do we sell Jesus? And that's why I say Christians are the least empathetic people. And you see that in the way that people vote, the way that people talk to one another, the way that people engage with one another. Because your empathy could not have you look at an immigrant woman at the border with her child, trying to find a better way and say, nope, you're an immigrant, you got to go back to your country.
Do it the right way.
Like there's just no way. It wouldn't even allow you to do that. Your empathy could not see a homeless person and say, well, you're the wrong color, I'm not helping you. Like, it just wouldn't, that wouldn't happen, right? And these are the same people who behave this way and then go to church on Sunday, and go to Bible study on Tuesday, and go to prayer meeting on Thursday, and choir practice on Saturday, and shout out of their shoes and their wigs on Sunday.
Yep. So I do hope that this video has given people something to think about. I know I'm gonna have all kinds of comments. So keep your comments constructive, as I always say, because y'all know I will block people. I will not hesitate. I don't do this for the likes or the follows. I do it because I think it's important for us to think. I really think it's important, especially now, for us, and I say us, especially as Black people and Black women, to engage in critical thinking. And I think that, religion generally and Christianity specifically has Black people in a chokehold all over the world, in the Caribbean. I mean, some of the things that, people say and do Africa, on the continent of Africa. You know, I traveled, people
Yeah.
know I travel. So it really made me think about this more, because some of the things that I would just hear people say and do, and I would just think, wow, you know what I mean? I mean, you
Mhm.
can't find more homophobic people than on the continent of Africa and in the Caribbean, right?
You can. You
And
can.
so and just and misogynist as well, right? And patriarchal. And you think like, where does this come from? Right? And so, and all of these things are byproducts of Christianity. So I do hope that it gives people something to think about as we are, you know, we have a new regime change in January 20th and a new year, and we got to think about really critically about, you know, how we got to where we are and what we need to do in order to save ourselves.
Mhm.
You know, and I'm not being hyperbolic,
Yeah.
right? In
Yeah.
order for Black people to survive what is coming, it is
Yeah.
going to require that we engage in a different way of thinking about things and in some serious shifts in our consciousness, right? And I
Yeah.
really do think that this is the last frontier for me. I think Black people really do understand that white supremacy is a thing, and that it is the thing that is the barrier to us realizing real equity and equality in the United States and elsewhere, right?
Right.
But we don't see the connection between it and Christianity. It's very
Yeah.
clear to me that we don't see that connection, and I think it's very important for us to see it, right? And what you
And
choose to do with it once you see it is your business. But I
yeah.
think it's important to see it, right? And
Yeah.
this, you know, so that's why I decided that I wanted to have this conversation, because you know, just surrendering to suffering to me is not the way to go. And
Yeah.
I see, you know, Black women especially, and we suffer, you know, a lot in this society. Some
Yeah.
would argue that we suffer almost the most in this
Yeah.
society. And I see how much a lot of us, you know, revert to this, well, I'm just going to pray and I'm just going to, you know, God will fix it and all this kind of thing. And I really think that we need to reflect on, like, where does that come from?
Where does that come from?
And how has that been working out for you? Right?
And will we not say for 400 years our ancestors were praying? Will we not say during Jim Crow our ancestors were praying? Will we not say when they were writing the Willie Lynch letters from the Caribbean, the way they were abusing us in the Caribbean, were those Africans not praying?
And I would say one thing more, but it's not the praying that got us out of this. It's not just praying that got us to where we are. And if we want to survive what's coming and thrive in the future, you can pray if you want to, right? But I want people to understand that there are things you have to actually do.
You
Because
have to
that's
do.
where my frustration comes from, when people come into my comments and start talking about, well, you just, you know, I'll just pray about it. No, you're gonna actually have to do something.
Well,
And
my
so
thing
I
is,
think you can believe, you know, this is my thing is, people have all kinds of religions. You believe whatever you want. But I really think it's important to understand that people had to do things, hard
yeah.
things, hard things in order to
So
position
do their
us
God not talk
now.
back to them when they pray and give them instructions? Like, oh, okay, so you said you're going to pray. Do you not get, does he not talk back to you? Do you not get instructions on what to do next? Right? And ironically, like if you say that, like I can't tell you how many Black people say, well, God told me just to be still. No, that's you. That ain't God. That was you. You want to be still. And that's fine, because a lot of times if you don't know what to do, I would say to people, like, right, just like if I don't know what to do, sometimes I will do nothing, right? And I'll wait until I know what to do. So that's okay. But the idea that you've been praying and God just told you to be still and to wait and to wait and to wait for what? What are you being still for? And I will say this, and I was saying this to Anne. When I was a devout Christian, people like me and other Black people who were deconstructing, I never even saw these people. I didn't even know Black people were out here deconstructing Christianity. I didn't even know this thing actually existed, right? And what I know about these conversations, if you are a devout Christian, nothing I say, nothing Anne says is going to penetrate you. In fact, you have already scrolled past, once you heard Christianity is white supremacy or connected. You scroll past it. That's how indoctrinated Christians are into their faith. But for the Black people who stayed for this conversation, what I know to be true, there is something, there was a questioning, there was a hesitation within yourself. You may have never verbalized it to anybody. May have never said it to family members or friends, but you started to question your faith in this religion. And that's why you're watching this video. That's why you're on this conversation. And I just want to say to those people who find this conversation, who is watching this video, is that it's okay to be nervous when you start to really engage around this conversation. Because what is going to happen is you're going to start to deconstruct something for you that has probably been the most primary area of your life. For a lot of Black people, being a Christian, going to church, having faith is such a huge and central part of your life that the thought of not having it will feel scary. But the ability to freely think and to really engage and ask questions that you didn't feel safe to ask before, there's something liberating in that. And so while some of us may come to this conversation nervous and anxious and not sure, I promise you, you may not end up where I end up. Ann and I believe that Christianity is a function of white supremacy, but we believe differently in whether or not we hold any parts of it. Ann still believes in Jesus. I believe in Jesus being a figure, but not in him being a savior, right? So we have different beliefs about that, right? But we do believe that it's a function of white supremacy. So as people begin to question this faith and this religion, you may end up in a different place than me and a different place than Ann, and that's okay. But I want people to at least start to think about this religion critically and whether or not this religion has harmed you in ways that have caused you to be okay with suffering. And I find that that is the biggest way that this religion has harmed not just Black people, but more importantly, poor people all around the world. It has made poor people be okay with suffering. And I will contend, and this will be the last I say on this, that this religion was never for the people that went around imposing it on the world. It was always for us. It was always to condition us to be suffering and to see it as righteousness. Because the people that control it all from the beginning ain't suffering, and they don't care that you don't think that they're righteous. Now, some of you are going to say, well, it don't matter, we care, it's what God sees. Our ancestors was praying to the same.
God just voted for one such person who can't even hold the Bible in the right direction without being told, because he never touched the Bible before.
Because that's not what they do, because the religion was never for them. It's always been as a tool to control us, and a tool that allows us to police ourselves, and then by extension police the people around us. And that is the primary function of white supremacy.
And I will let that be the last word. If you want to talk more about this topic, I encourage you to follow Tammy on TikTok, because this is not something I talk about all the time. As you guys know, I primarily talk about HR things, but I do like to talk about white supremacy because it is at the root of much of what we experience in the workplace. Yeah. And so, over the last several months, I've talked about the connection between white supremacy and lots of other things. And I really felt like I would not be doing my subscribers service and speaking the truth as I choose to do on my channel if I did not also talk about the connection between Christianity and white supremacy, because there is a connection, just like, we talked about lots of other topics. So I thought it was very important to talk about this on my channel. But if you want to talk about this more, then Tammy's the person to follow on TikTok. Tammy, tell them how to find you on TikTok.
So you can find me on TikTok, and this name is going to make some of you laugh. I am delusional influencer. I am delusional enough to believe that the conversations that I have can really influence people, not to just think about their lives, but think about how they're showing up in the world. And that's relative to race, gender, sexuality, and more important, this religion that a lot of us have been brought into. And so you can find me on TikTok as delusional influencer. On YouTube, I am Empathy Embodied. You can find me there as well.
And you guys, I hope that this was a helpful conversation. I will have Tammy's contact information in the description of this video as well, so you'll be able to link to her directly to her channel on YouTube, as well as to her on TikTok. I hope that this has at least given you something to talk about. Comment constructively. I know that you will. And thank you for being here, Tammy, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.